the Hook Norton Ironstone railway, which was a 2-foot gauge industrial line at the little village of Hook Norton, was based and connected to the Great Western Railway standard gauge line running from Banbury on the line up from Oxford to Birmingham, and from Banbury it headed south through King's Sutton, where it left the main line, and then went through the little villages of Adderbury and Bloxham, and Hook Norton was the next one along. And after Hook Norton it passed through fairly it's all agricultural countryside, but some distance, with only the intermediate stop of Rollright Halt, which was pretty remote, and then into Chipping Norton, which was where it joined end on to the branch from Kingham, or what had been Chipping Norton Junction, which was on the line from Oxford to Worcester, the old Worcester and Wolverhampton Railway. From Kingham the branch then went over the Worcester line and then headed on, joined to the Bolton-on-the-Water Railway, and carried on westwards from Kingham to Stow-on-the-Wold, then on to Bolton-on-the-Water, and then proceeded further west to Knott Grove and Oversford, where eventually the Midland and South Western Junction Railway from Swindon Way came up to join it from the south. And from Oversford it proceeded westwards on through Charlton Kings, Cheltenham South and Leckhampton, and then turned almost 180 degrees to join the GWR line into Cheltenham, Great Western Railway Cheltenham Station. But the Hook Norton site was of importance because just under the surface were deposits of ironstone, and it was for this purpose that the narrow gauge system was developed, which eventually extended quite a way from Hook Norton station itself out into the fields, surrounding fields, and where a number of areas were stripped back of their topsoil. The ironstone layer was then removed, and then the topsoil was returned, and so there's little evidence now of this remarkable industry. Well, the line opened, the standard gauge line opened through Hook Norton station in the late 1880s, about 1887, and it was quite spectacular, some of it. There was a substantial viaduct to the west of Hook Norton station itself, which took the single track standard gauge line onto the west. But around Hook Norton itself, a number of concerns established themselves to exploit the ironstone beneath the surface, to extract it, and there were a number of quarries run by different organisations, including the Hook Norton Ironstone Partnership, which was from the late 1880s to just before the First World War. But perhaps the most important group of these were the ones that were associated with the Brymbo Steel Company, based in northeast Wales, which took over the ironstone quarry at Hook Norton from just about the end of the Victorian, the 19th century, from about 1890, 94, 98, something like that, and that continued operations right the way through until just after the Second World War. Well, what did they actually do? Well, at Hook Norton itself they built a connecting narrow gauge, 2-foot gauge railway, which operated to the south and west of Hook Norton station, and also indeed there was a line at one stage which ran over to the northwest of the station, so it was quite an extensive layout through the countryside. And they operated extraction. They extracted the ironstone, stripped back the topsoil, dug down in what's known as an adit, that is like a bank, where you've cut down into the ground, you've created a new surface, and then you're cutting sideways into the untouched ground and extracting the ironstone, which is fairly sort of granular, but looks like iron, has a reddish tinge to it. And what they would do is they would, this would be initially shoveled by hand into little 2-foot gauge wagons, but eventually they got a steam navvy, a mechanical digger, to move this into the little 2-foot gauge wagons, and then 2-foot gauge steam engines would then propel these, or draw these wagons to the calcining plant. And the calcining plant was, they were basically furnaces, very similar to kilns, but built of cast iron, and they stood very prominently above the ground, quite a feature locally. And the wagons would be lifted up in a gantry to the top of these towers. They would then be, the ironstone would then be tipped in, and it would then be roasted. It would the water content, they're trying to drive out the water content of the ironstone so that it was going to produce a much more higher grade of ore. And once the ore had been calcined, it was then shot out of these great calcining kilns and into standard gauge wagons, which were then shunted up to Hook Norton station, and they then began their journey to Brimbo in northeast Wales, to the Brimbo Steelworks. And so this operated very effectively. Initially there were 2 of these great calcining kilns built there, but as the quarries expanded, not only did the motive power increase, but also there were 4 calcining kilns established. Extra track was laid out, and remarkably for the Oxfordshire countryside, this was quite an extensive industrial site. They used gas, and they had their own gas tanks there. Several of these sort of almost they're tubular with hemispherical ends. They had a number of workshops for both for generating the gas from coal and for as salt houses, and also for maintaining the equipment and for stabling the locomotives. And there were a number of locomotives which were used on the site, and some of these are really lovely little locomotives. One which is particularly well known, of course, is Russell, which is now at the other Festiniog Railway, or was at the other Festiniog Railway in Wales, and it was at Hook Norton for a relatively short time towards the end of its existence. The main locomotives at Hook Norton were Gwen, which was built by Hudswell Clark in about 1898, 1900, and this was followed by Joan just about the time of the First World War. And during the First World War, these ironstone workings were very valuable because they were some of the native sources of iron ore, and they were eventually supplemented by one called Black Bess, which came in the time just before the Second World War. And this was a very well-known design of a Hunslet built about 1917, and it was one of the ones used on the Western Front. And but as I say, it was Gwen and Betty and Joan, little locomotives, which ran the majority of the services. Betty itself was from Hunslets and was built in 1912, and originally was due to go to a granite quarry in Wales, but eventually it ended up at Hook Norton. And this was pretty much the case with Hook Norton locomotives. They were built for other concerns and then transferred to Hook Norton. So out in the Oxfordshire countryside, you see this little industrial, quite intensive industrial development, extraction, running train upon train of little 2-foot gauge ore wagons, and these would be run through to the calcining plants, be lifted up, tipped, and then the ironstone itself would be after calcining would be shipped off to Brimbo. Here we have my models of the different bits and pieces that made up the one of the Hook Norton Ironstone workings. These large objects here, smoking away, they are a scenery item, an animated scenery item, and these are the calcining kilns where the ironstone was dumped in at the top and coke was put in at the bottom, and the ironstone was cooked or calcined. So it was, a lot of water was driven out and made the ironstone suitable then for sending off to the ironworks in North Wales for smelting into iron. And you can see up here the animation, which runs continuously, is of a full tub containing ironstone. It goes into the tippler and it spins around and dumps its load into the calcining kiln, and then it turns around and comes back along to the lift. And you see the wheel up here as it drops down. There it is, dropping down to the ground level. And another wagon has come up full of calcined ore, and it goes into a circular tippler around the back of these, and there's a standard gauge line where you have wagons waiting to receive the load. And what you should do is set this up as an bit of industry track, producing the ironstone, which then can then be loaded into the standard gauge wagons. And then there's I've just put any old 2-foot gauge track that I happen to have installed. It's not the best type as far as this is concerned. But you can see here that there's 3 different wagons which I've made of these little tubs, and as well as this is a complete this whole the calcining kilns is a complete model. Actually what it is it's the lift and the cross pieces, and these are separate dependencies which you just load as well, and they come in automatically. And there's this is the 4 kiln version. There's also a 2 kiln version which I've made. Plenty of smoke, because there's a lot of smoke produced by this process, not just from the kilns themselves, but you'll see from the chimneys there. All 4 chimneys at the back are also exhausting. Now what about the other things? Well, the 2-foot gauge track is any 2-foot gauge track that you find is suitable. Although I put in a load, I put in a wagon turntable here and a bit of track there. These won't rotate. This is just part of the animation. I wasn't going to do any more than that. But if you put a piece of industry track in there for 2-foot gauge, then you can have it unloading the raw quarried ore, and these wagons will then continue animation, and it will consume and set the industry track to consume the ore, and the other industry track to produce the ore. So you've got 3 different shades. You can see there 3 different shades of the tubs. Nothing very dramatic about those. But I've also modelled the very distinctive beautiful little narrow gauge locomotives which operated. And let's actually have a look at Gwen. So here's Gwen, one of the 2-foot gauge locos, and she operated for a long time on the line. Just this would go off into fields here where there were surface adits where it was being cut out of like a bank, cut down into the ground. So there's Gwen, the little 2-foot gauge loco, and over here at the water tank. Now all these are modelled on actual buildings at Hook Norton, so the water tank is modelled from that as well. And this one is, this one's Betty. So there she is, ready to take on the water. And these loco sheds are based upon the ones that were at Hook Norton. Behind there is a gas plant for the torch house, and then you've got this extraordinary looking gas container here for producing the gas burnt along with coke to calcine the ore. So there's Betty, and she's another nice little locomotive, little super gauge locomotive, very diminutive, maybe up and down the lines all day long, drawing those little super gauge tugs. And then the beta locomotives, or locomotives that they acquired, this one is is Black Bess, both in livery and without livery, and these of course are based upon railway operating department narrow gauge locomotives built for the War Department during the First World War, and then subsequently bought by different industrial concerns. So Betty and Gwen would have been pre-First World War, and these would have been introduced alongside Betty and Gwen after the First World War. And then at the time of the Second World War, because iron ore was so important, locally produced, home-produced iron ore, Russell, which I haven't modelled because there is a model on the download station, Russell also came here to Hook Mountain for a few years. And what else have we got here? We've got a warehouse and general plant, and I think stuff, yeah, and there's a single version of it over here. So there you are. There's let's go back to free roaming. So there's a look around the industrial, little rural industry of ironstone extraction. There's the gas plant, you can see the gas storage plant there, and all the gas piping was underground, so that's quite convenient. And there's just a little retort house tucked in there, but you can arrange these in any way you like. You can have a number of these calcining kilns dotted along, and this only had 4 as a maximum, but there's no reason why you shouldn't have a dozen. Have 2 more of these running away if you like, and altogether producing, I think, a very good and interesting little industrial area on any layout. So 2-foot gauge feeder line, but with a standard gauge connection for you to add into your layout. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed this short video, and I hope you learned something about the history of ironstone extraction in the South Midlands of England, and I hope you find these models of interest. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. Please leave comments, you're always welcome, questions, anything like that. These are all available on my website, and I think some of them at least are available on the download station. All of my stuff is always available on one website, and the web address is on this video at the end.